You're starting a new country where everything is going to be free. So, how does that even work?
Well, okay, so it's a theory, an economic theory, but the line of logic is very solid. The basic concept behind this is, and we've seen it in the past, where the government couldn't regulate, get its grip on a particular industry, say the computer industry, particularly the last portion of the 20th century into the 21st century, both computer power and information. The value, the access to power rose and rose, rising toward infinity now with AI. The costs drop because the government couldn't get its regulatory grip on it. The ruling class was basically largely kept at bay because it advanced so quickly. They just didn't know how to do it. So that's a little microcosm of how I see Immortalis. In Immortalis, we won't have a ruling class because of our prime law constitution.
And what is Immortalis?
Immortalis is a new country that I'm starting. Right now it's a digital country, what's called a network state. The whole idea is in 10 years to have a land-based country with sovereignty. We have a plan to go about that. But so the idea is that there will be no ruling class. First time on planet Earth that there's a civilization with no ruling class. That comes down to our prime law constitution, which forbids the use of initiatory force in the government, initiatory force being initiating force, like regulations, legislation, litigation. Initiating force as opposed to the proper purpose of government is self-defense force, protecting the people, not moving into agendas, political agendas and politicizing, which just holds everything back. So this will be a country for the first time on planet Earth with no ruling class, no initiatory force in government.
And so what does that lead to?
It leads to a country that is moving toward the little description, what I call puzzle piece that I showed you before. They talked to you about computer power and information rising toward infinity where the costs are dropping towards zero. Well, that would be across all industries. The whole industrial landscape would experience that, what I call the great technological revolution. And as that goes on, prices will be driven down towards zero, as we saw with computer power and information. Values would rise toward infinity, again, as we see with computer power and AI information. Information used to be a very expensive commodity. Now it's free. You just go to ChatGPT. So that will happen, that phenomenon will happen across all industries. So it will drive prices down. So eventually, people will be wealthy. There won't be any poverty. There won't even be a middle class. People will just be wealthy because their buying power would rise so high in a country like that.
Okay, that's making sense. So just like in the computers, the prices that will happen across all industries. So the prices of all other industries from housing, energy, food, will all plummet towards zero as the value increases.
That's correct.
And across everything.
That's correct.
Everything.
That's
so
correct.
that's pretty incredible. And so that's how basically prices are going to drop towards zero and make everything free. Is that correct?
Well, that's the theory, and there's a powerful line of logic supporting that theory.
Okay. Let's say everything is free. So why would anyone work, and how could there be any productivity or output because everything's free? So why would anyone want to work?
Right. Let me shed some light on that. And we have to shed our 21st century skin because we're caught in a certain way of thinking and seeing things. But everything changes. It's an inflection point, a completely different paradigm in this civilization that has, as I said, has never existed on planet Earth. As long as there's been mankind,
absolutely hasn't existed.
It's not existed. Right. So we've always had, when I say it hasn't existed, I mean every civilization has been suppressed under a ruling class. Mm-hmm. And there's reasons behind that. It's all in my writings. I won't get into all that now. But that we have a new civilization here that's never existed, that has no ruling class. So everything changes in the way we view and approach things. So I'm going to try to shed a little light on that right here. First of all, let's just take an example. Let's say restaurants. Why would people want to serve you in a restaurant, clean up, wash dishes, cook food? Why would they want to do that labor for you for free?
Right. I don't see why they would.
And across any area, jobs of labor, you would ask that same question.
And jobs of labor meaning what?
I mean, where you're physically doing things as opposed to a job of the mind where you're creating something. So let's just stick to jobs of labor right now because
Okay.
we got to get those out of the way first.
So it would be like servers, cashiers, front desk people, retail workers.
Exactly.
So jobs of labor that use the body.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right. That the mind is really not that big of a deal in those jobs. So, all right. So we have jobs of labor. Now, years ago, I wrote in my literature how as the economy evolves, as technology increases and evolves, we are going to eventually replace jobs of labor with automation, with robots, with computers. For example, when I was a little boy, my father took me to Detroit to a car factory, manufacturing cars, an assembly line. And I remember looking at the workers, and they were all men in all the stations. They were all men doing their movements, their physical movements to put together the car. You go to any car manufacturing now, and it's all robotic arms. There's no more men doing those jobs.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a clear example. Now, as we progress, particularly if we progress quickly, which we will in Immortalis, you will not have people eventually doing jobs of labor. Let me call jobs of labor close-ended jobs. In other words, there's no growth in those.
Yeah.
They're stagnant routine ruts, basically.
Yeah.
I'll call them dead-end jobs. Look, I don't mean to be, putting anything down because I appreciate all workers.
Well, it's just fact.
They're contributors to society. But 10, 20, 30 years, they're not going to be, they're going to stagnate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are close-ended jobs of labor. And in a great technological revolution, robotics, automation, computer, it will all be replaced. All dead-end jobs will be replaced by computers and automation.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, especially now seeing Tesla's robots,
Right.
they have AI chip and they could do all the physical movements that a human could do.
Yes.
So that means they could be a bartender. That means they could do landscaping. They could, work on machinery, and they could do retail and all those jobs that don't really require. So then what's the difference between a job of labor versus a job that AI and robotics won't be able to fulfill?
Right, and that's going into the jobs of the mind. And as I wrote about years ago in my writings, as this automation moves in and robots move in, computers move in, well, it pushes mankind up from jobs of labor into what I call jobs of the mind. Basically, those are jobs that require creativity. Now, understand that human beings are the only animal and the only entity on planet Earth that can create values. We're creative beings. That is our essence. We survive. Your survival mechanism is your essence. We survive by being creative. We are creative people. We are creative beings. So we are being pushed now out of these jobs of labor. That's fantastic. But we're being pushed into jobs of the mind. We're finally aligning with our essence. Now, when you move into creativity, into what I call value creation, well, then something happens inside. If you're working at McDonald's, for 10 years, all right, stagnation moves in. But when you move into value creation, where you're using your mind to create values for humanity, when that happens, the light turns on inside you. The child of the past comes back in you. And at that point, you're happy. You're pursuing your essence, and you're living with a whole different level than you were when you were in a stagnant routine rut. So this is a very good thing that's going to happen and is happening and will happen rapidly in Immortalis.
So it sounds like humankind, or all of the citizens in Immortalis, are basically getting a major promotion, because that's how I'm seeing this. It's like in a job, you work at your job for a bit, then once you get really skilled at it, then you get a promotion, but you have to, bring somebody else in to train them, and then to develop their skills. And then when your skills are developed, you can get to the next level. So it's almost like humankind is getting a promotion, whereas the AI and robotics take their place. They can focus on higher skills which is thinking and being creative.
Absolutely, and it is truly the direction that humankind must move in. It's truly the direction. So now let's look at the dynamics as to what starts happening in this new civilization. So in this civilization, without the suppression of what I'll just call right here, right now, the cult. I call the ruling class a cult. People don't realize it's a cult because they've always lived in it. They've been brought up in the cult through their schooling and so on and so forth. Where
the ruling class, you mean government?
Yes, basically, government. Also, that includes largely who they work hand in hand with.
Politicians, bureaucrats.
And the media, the influential class, the revolving door with big business, now a lot with big pharma. It's all part of the ruling class that basically controls us through illusions to where we think we need them. We think that they're important, that they're valuable. It's all an illusion. It's unearned power. And I'm here to break that illusion. I call it a cult. And we start getting brainwashed as children, and it controls us, controls our lives by manipulating our minds for the benefit of the cult leaders. I mentioned to you before how a politician comes in worth maybe $50,000, $100,000, and they leave worth $200 million. Where'd that come from?
Disgusting.
Right? They're taking advantage of the people through their cult. They're the cult leaders.
Right.
Okay, so that's all gone in Immortalis because of the prime law that does not allow initiatory force. The only way you can have a ruling class is if they're allowed initiatory force to control us through initiatory force. That's the only way. And all that initiatory force is just so much more than we can even imagine because we've never been exposed to what we're going to create in Immortalis. So people don't realize how much we've been suppressed, not just us individually, but society as a whole, civilization as a whole. We've been so suppressed. So when we go into Immortalis, particularly when we're land-based, and there's none of this limitation, none of this ruling class, this cult controlling us and manipulating us and taking advantage and getting money and power off our backs. When that's all gone, it's going to accelerate at such speeds. And guess what happens? Remember what I started this with, where the government couldn't get its grip on the computer revolution and the information revolution, and it drove prices down towards zero to fractions, and then it drove values toward infinity. Yes. Well, when that starts happening in Immortalis, the whole dynamic of money changes because everyone will become wealthy. Just like today we're wealthy with computer power. You're putting in your pocket something, you get it for a few $100, buy a used iPhone, a couple $100, that Fortune 500 billion-dollar Fortune 500 companies could only afford not too long ago on their mainframes. We have that computer power now right in our pockets.
Right. So everyone's cell phone has more computing power than the rocket ship that went to the moon.
There you go, right there. So this is what I'm talking about. Everything's going to follow that pattern in Immortalis. So when that happens, and you very quickly reach a point where you can afford anything and everything you want, and then more, because the costs are driven down so dramatically. We just have no idea right now because we've never been exposed to this. But the line of logic is this, that you're going to very quickly, all citizens in Immortalis are very quickly going to have the purchasing power to get anything they want. So everything starts to change. The motivation for making money starts to change, particularly for the business owners. You see, this free business will start at the top. Imagine Elon Musk in Immortalis. It won't be before long where profits, really, they don't mean anything to him other than the metrics of how successful his marketable values are. But myself, for example, owning a publishing company, I would so prefer to give my books out for free to reach millions of people rapidly than to have to charge for them. But to survive, to pay for what I have to charge for them in this civilization. But in that civilization, I wouldn't, because the money I have would last me the rest of my life and then beyond, and no one be even thinking in terms of money. So motivation must change,
Right.
particularly for business owners. Motivation must change. So by understanding motivation, if I'm not motivated to make profits anymore because money becomes more and more meaningless in that civilization, then what happens? Well, then I'm motivated by my essence, my creativity, the values I create for the world, and the pride, the happiness, the joy that brings me. Remember, I've written and I've talked to you about playing for adults is creating. Creating values is the way adults play. That brings back the child of the past. When you're a child, you're playing, you're happy, you're joyful. When you're an adult, the way you play, you're happy, you're joyful, is through creating values. And what are you doing? You're creating values. So you're creating values for mankind.
Right.
With the beautiful ecosystem there to make you happy, to bring you pride and happiness and joy, is you bringing values to your fellow man out there. What a beautiful ecosystem. It changes everything from the virtue of selfishness, as Ayn Rand said, to the virtue of selflessness. But you're still selfish, but it's selfless. You see, it's just this incredibly beautiful ecosystem. I can't even, it's hard to get your brain around it, but it's just so beautiful. So this is this beauty, and I call it the beautiful society, Immortalis. This is what's going to happen in Immortalis. Money becomes less and less meaningful. Business owners start saying, well, heck, I don't need to charge for this. I'm going to make it free. And then that just the ripple effects goes all the way through. Even the lower people. And remember, there's no more people doing manual labor anymore.
Right.
So they're all on these creative. So it won't take long before they'll be doing the same thing. Well, I don't need to charge for this anymore. I can afford everything I need and then some. So the economic theory is you can actually enter a moneyless society. That's the driving force, the engine behind the economy is no longer money, tangible money. It's intangible, spiritual, emotional payoff.
It's like mankind almost like transcends to another level. Right now, where it's very focused on, the physical, the tangible, the money, the profit. Whereas how you're describing it, mankind will kind of transcend that and be more spiritual, emotional, fulfillment, and in that realm. So that's really interesting, and it seems like, I don't know, it seems like there are, ever since kind of the beginning of commerce and things like that, there have been throughout the world people and groups that have similarly identified a parallel projection of how the future and mankind should live, which is, it sounds very similar to what you're talking about. But the difference that I see with them and you is that you actually have the path to get there.
Yes.
Whereas others, could just be, sitting around talking about it or, singing Kumbaya about it.
Yes.
Whereas, you actually have the path to get there, and it's crazy. And it's like the same end result, but the path to get there is like diametrically opposite. On one side, it's like, just make everything. It's like, communism and socialism.
Right.
And the other side is pure free market. Just pure free market will get you there.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you do hear a lot of this. We'll just call it kumbaya, right? And what that is, again, those are the illusions being cast by our leaders. They have no right being our leaders. I'm calling them out for that. They have no right, because it's unearned power. They're elected, and they just, all of a sudden, they have all this initiatory force power over us.
It's manipulation.
It's completely wrong. So what you're describing there is them using an illusion to gain your vote. Their power is your vote. And so they present this compassionate outlook on the world. But their compassion, and this is how you always know they're power seekers, is you look at their path to provide that so-called compassion, and it requires initiatory force upon you and the people.
Always.
That's the way you can see through that. Now, let's just call it the irony. I'm getting us to that point, but through no initiatory force, the diametric opposite, as you said.
Just humankind will end up getting there.
And those people are the first to attack capitalism. Capitalism is something evil and taking advantage of people. We've never had pure capitalism because of the ruling class initiating force on us and suppressing things. But now in Immortalis, it will actually be just pure mutual value exchange. That's pure capitalism. And in pure capitalism, we're going to get to the ultimate compassionate story that these false leaders put out there as illusions. But ours is real. Ours is the real deal. This is the path. It's never happened on planet Earth. It's never even been identified because this civilization has been, you can't see what you can't see. And they don't see this because it's never happened. But now, through having written the fictional presentation Neothink puzzle, now I'm actualizing it, and it is the actual way to a moneyless, free, purely compassionate society where everything's done for everyone else, but that's what brings you your payoffs, your happiness, your joy, your playfulness. It's through creating values for others.
You're definitely tapping into a sentiment that's, again, like I said, it's people have been feeling this. Humankind has been feeling this since the beginning.
Yes.
And now you're actually offering the real path to that.
And it's never been offered.
That's
the key.
Like a real path that's actual, logical, and, without wishful thinking.
Yes.
So this is going to be incredible to see and how this comes to fruition. So also, do you have any more examples?
Well, yeah, what I'd like to do is, I already covered what would happen to the jobs of labor. So we've settled that dispute, right? So now we understand what's going to happen there. So now I want to talk about when we're in this rapidly evolving civilization, I want to bring in some of the emotions and I can give you examples of what's going to happen. When you move into such a civilization where you're no longer sort of messing with jobs of labor, you're really on man's essence now, on value creation. Everyone's on value creation. So you're in that beautiful society, I call it. Now, when that happens, Neothink is going to take over. You see, today we are stuck in different levels of thinking. Perceptual thinking, I've talked a lot about this. It's basically a C-react. You go to your job of labor. Here are the delegated responsibilities. You see them, you do them. You see them, you do them.
It's almost like you're a robot.
Correct, yeah. 20 years later, 30 years later, you see and you do. That's perceptual thinking. Some people break out of that and rise to conceptual thinking. So where they get a little more power, they can rise up a little bit, maybe to a management position, because they're thinking more concepts like, how can I improve the business? They get curious, they learn their business. I write about Project Curiosity, and they pull together some good concepts that help the company in different ways, so they rise up a little bit. But then there's neo-thinking, and 99% of the people or more never enter neo-thinking. Now, your super achievers are all neo-thinkers. Elon Musk is a neo-thinker. Steve Jobs, Henry Ford was a neo-thinker. Thomas Edison, they're all neo-thinkers, the super achievers. And that's pulling together concepts into what I call these puzzle pictures. And you can build these amazing puzzles, as I've done with creating Immortalis. In fact, I've done several Neothink puzzle pictures along the way. That's why I've sold $350 million of my books around the world in 140 countries and 12 languages, because I offer this marketable value. I've created these values by using Neothink. Neothink pulls together these puzzle pieces, and as in our as we've talked in the past, I've laid out these puzzle pieces that show how these things form. Well, that's what's going to happen. That's going to be the actual common way of thinking in Immortalis, because now everyone's risen beyond their dead-end routine ruts, and they're all in this creative mode. So they're going to be moving into these bigger, higher realms of thinking where they're going to be bringing together puzzle pieces to build these amazing, what I call super puzzles, Neothink super puzzles that can push all of humanity forward. And I have an example, a little sneak peek into that right now, right today, right in our, we'll just call it an anti-civilization, because it's not the beautiful society. It's a society where we're pushed down through our cult. Okay, so
where everything's backwards.
Exactly, everything's backwards and upside down, and good is bad, bad is good. You'd all know what I mean. I don't need to give examples.
Yeah.
You all know what I mean. So, all right. So, in this society, we just had an administration change, and in comes Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy with DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. And they put out what, at face value in this anti-civilization, you would look at this and you would say, go to hell. They put out this advertisement all over social media saying, we need you to work 80 plus hours a week with no compensation. Well, I'm telling you right now, if anyone walks up to someone and say, you're going to work for me for 80 hours a week for free, I'm not going to pay you anything, they say, go to hell.
Yeah.
But guess what's happening here? Thousands and thousands, overwhelming response to Elon and Vivek. They want to, even, and not just the lowest of your dishwashers and all that, even your top professionals, lawyers, doctors, accountants, by the thousands. They have so many resumes that they can't even get to them all. So what you're seeing there is DOGE is a little advanced peek at something that we'll be doing regularly in Immortalis. It is a move to push all of humanity up, to push it by getting rid of this corruption, by cutting the ruling class, by cutting the cult dramatically.
I see. I mean, Elon Musk is making zero. He's actually losing money doing this because of his time opportunity cost. Yeah. And all these other people are just straight up volunteering. Thousands have been applying for this.
Yes.
That's
yes.
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's overwhelming, the response.
And not being paid.
Not being paid.
Working 80 hours a week.
Yes, and not just, like I said, not just as dishwashers. We're talking about doctors, accountants. I mean, highly paid professionals are willing to take a leave and get into this. And see.
So why?
Because that's the beauty of human nature. When you are involved in a Neothink super puzzle, which DOGE is, that's going to push and lift all humanity, people want to be part of that. Now, I call it a super puzzle. So what do they want to do? They want to be a puzzle piece to the super puzzle because they know it's for the good of mankind. They want to be part of that.
Yeah.
They want to be plugged into that. And they aren't doing it for money. They aren't doing it for money. Money's moneyless now. These guys are receiving no money whatsoever. Money is, to them, they don't care about the money. They're sucked into the joy and the happiness and the pride. Their child of the past is coming back because they're going to be a puzzle piece to the super puzzle of lifting humanity. That's what Neothink super puzzles do for you. And these people are doing that in this current civilization that you do need money to survive. So imagine in our civilization where you do not need money to survive.
Yeah. So again, humankind gets a promotion to work on things that are more contribution and fulfilling.
Exactly.
And creating values for others. And we see an example of that right now with DOGE. So that's pretty crazy. And I'm really starting to understand this, and it's making a lot of sense. I mean, there's no other reason why these guys are doing a brutal work. I saw the tweet from DOGE. They were like, this is going to be hard freaking work. 80 hours a week, no pay, and you have these high achievers actually saying, yes, I'm going to put everything aside for, almost 2 years and do this because it's moving humanity forward, and they have a
Right.
calling for it to create values for this country.
That's right. So there you see it. The draw of Neothink super puzzles, pure, free Neothink super puzzles. It just pulls people in this civilization where they still need their money to survive. So this inflection point, this paradigm shift into immortalis, you can just imagine. And let me tell you, these people are so over the top enthusiastic. I've read a couple of the resumes that were sent to Vivek and to Elon, and they're just over the top excited about doing this. It's like they're calling. So imagine in Immortalis now, where we have these large Neothink super puzzles that are lifting humanity as a whole. Imagine the driving force within the individuals, just that level of joy and happiness. No longer will someone be saying, isn't there more to my life? Is this all there is? No, they're going to be excited beyond excitement. They're going to be playing as adults. A child of the past returns, and guess what happens?
What?
At this point in time, they are suited to live eternally. They have no more burden of life. That's left them. Stagnation is gone. So they're living eternally suited. They are now immortals in Immortalis. Now we just have to drive to cure aging and death to make these people who are now immortals. You see, your people today are not immortals because the burden of life grows as they get older. I won't go through the whole thing, but I've done that before, where you see why the burden of life starts piling up on you, because you're not meant to live. Human consciousness is not meant to live with stagnation. And the stagnation will kill you in the end, because we're not meant to live stagnant. But in this Immortalis, in this other civilization, stagnation will not enter. You'll always be this over the top, enthusiastic for these, you'll be playing at life for these larger than life Neothink super puzzles that you're a part of. You have a piece. I've written about, going back into some of my books, about the division of essence, a breakthrough in business, from the division of labor to the division of essence, where you bring in the mind and the creativity. Well, the Neothink super puzzles, where everyone's plugging into these, that's the ultimate division of essence. That's the way mankind, civilization was supposed to live in unity, joy, and happiness. It's not some stupid politician out there painting out all that bullshit to try to get votes. This is the real deal, baby. This is people moving into the life they were meant to live.
Wow. And I see that. I mean, especially with you. You don't need to work. But you still do. And you don't just work. You work 12, 14-hour, 16-hour days, writing and doing all the things you're doing. And I remember growing up asking you, it's like, why? And then, you say, this is what I'm meant to do. This is
building Neothink super puzzles is what I'm doing.
Right. You're helping others. You're helping society. You're trying to create a better world for you, your loved ones, us, your kids.
Yeah.
And and society itself,
our Neothink family, our 2 million members, and now I want to spread that out across the world.
And I also see Elon Musk as another easy example. He's going to Mars, and he's trying to colonize Mars to make consciousness an interplanetary species for when we get to that point, so we can live beyond some of the current limitations staying here on Earth. And he's tweeted about people criticize him because he was like, he's not going to be able to make any money. And he's like, you guys are missing the point completely.
Right.
The reason I'm doing this is to advance civilization forward. The reason I'm doing is to save consciousness from being wiped out or limited by only being able to stay here on Earth.
That's right.
So you start seeing that. And also I see that in some artists, where they're, at least right now, for some artists, it's unfortunate they don't have the monetary income to live. I mean, the saying, the starving artist, but there's a lot of them because that's what they're meant for. That's
Yes.
what they were born to do. That's their calling, and they still do it. They could make a lot more money doing other things,
Correct.
but they still continue to pursue their passion.
They're playing at life.
Right. They're playing at life even with, minimal
Yes.
income.
Yes.
So,
Because they're on their essence, they're being creative, they're creating values.
and so you're saying every single person will have that feeling.
All
Every single person will have that passion, will know how they want to contribute and create values and get deep, everlasting fulfillment.
That's right. That child of the past will rise up in everyone in immortalis. And I have a prediction too. And it's when I say it's going to sound way out there, but pretty much everything I've been saying today sounds way out there, right?
Yeah.
So I have a prediction that people such as Elon Musk and the people, the billionaires, there's the whole billionaire club out there who want to live forever. They're pouring hundreds of millions of dollars toward longevity. But I have information for you guys. It's not going to happen in your lifetime, not when you're in the anti-civilization with the cult and all the initiatory force holding everything back since the past quarter of century. Remember that everyone used to be saying around the turn of the century, 7 years till we cure aging. And they're still saying that today.
Right.
It's what I call the loop. It's the loop in the anti-civilization. They pull the initiatory force, regulatory bureaucracies pull everything down. You've met scientists in Singapore at the Balaji conference. They tell you there's nowhere in the world they can progress on their research because of regulations, legislation, litigation.
Right. They're working with an arm and a leg tied behind their back. They're being
Exactly.
slowed down, which also is less incentive for investors to get in because instead of having cures in 6 months, they have to take 10 years because of FDA
Right.
red tape.
Right.
It takes forever.
Right. And, we had the example, your grandfather, my father, they had a cure for cancer 50 years ago at DuPont with that extremely fine textile impregnated with cancer-killing drugs would be injected into the bloodstream. It would encase the tumors throughout your body and be harmless inside you at that point. So that was 50 years ago. But the regulations, the anti-civilization, those cost-prohibitive regulations killed that project. And if that's at the largest chemical company in the world, you can just imagine your scientists that you met at the Balaji conference.
And that was 50 years ago.
It's
and
50 years ago.
The hand just gets heavier every single year. So if they couldn't do it then, they can't do it now.
That's right. And then look at all the lives we've lost to cancer in the past 50 years that would have been cured. Okay, so that's the damage of the cult, and we don't realize how damaging it is because we've been brainwashed and we need deprogramming. I think the deprogramming is going to start with Doge because for the first time, people are going to say, hell no, we don't need a ruling class, at least not like we have today. It will begin to deprogram them. I call it staging for immortalis. But here's my prediction. That seems way out there, but like I said, everything I've been saying today seems way out there. I do believe the billionaires who want to live forever, that they're going to realize in the anti-civilization, they're never going to get it in their lifetime. Yeah, their grandkids may get it, but they won't get it themselves. And that's the most important thing to them. It's not their companies. That's important to them. But the most important thing to them is to cure aging and death.
Right.
Because they don't want to die. And there's no way to do that in this anti-civilization. The only way to do that is with the prime law constitution of immortalis that prohibits any initiatory force. So you don't have the cult suppressing everything, and you just have this boom of creativity that we've been talking about. And then we will cure aging and death within our lifetimes. So my prediction is that those billionaires, that billionaire club, and including people like Elon Musk, are going to come to our land base or help us even get that sooner than 10 years because they have the money, the power, the influence to really help us get the land and get sovereignty. My prediction is that some of those guys are going to get on board because once we have land and sovereignty, it will overnight become the medical mecca of the world. Because all these scientists that you've run into, all these DuPont scientists, all these companies that are not like wired in with the ruling class, these companies, these true, honest value creators, geniuses will have this brain drain. They'll come to Immortalis, and they are going to cure aging and death within our lifetime.
You're not just talking about a new country. You're not just talking about a new governance model. You're talking about a whole new era of human existence that's never been seen on this planet ever before.
I'm glad you said that.
It's a whole new paradigm of existence and living. This is crazy.
And I'm just aligning, and you're absolutely right. It will be the first civilization on Earth that joins our cousins throughout the universe. And what I mean by that is there is what I call a civilization of the universe. Every civilization throughout the universe reached a point where they had the power, the nuclear power, to wipe out civilization. That's called your nuclear decision threshold. We're right there on planet Earth. We are at our nuclear decision threshold.
And what's the threshold?
Wiping ourselves out with a nuclear holocaust.
Or
removing irrationality from society. We're inundated with irrationality. You just look around the world today. There's irrationality coming out of our ears all over the world, including right here in America.
Of course, yeah.
So to surpass that, you have to, my father, the author and discoverer of Neo-Tech philosophy, which grew out of Ayn Rand's objectivism and the long line of Aristotelian philosophers, he pointed out that the mind disease of human beings, he called it mysticism. Basically, that means irrationality, which involves laziness and dishonesty. All of our leaders in the cult are mystical people. They got their lazy root, and they're dishonest as hell. And we just need to open the eyes to people. But through my past, we've confronted the ruling class, and we've had to take a lot of blows by doing so. Now, instead of confronting them, I'm simply withdrawing from them, and I'm inviting everyone who understands what I'm talking about here today. I'm inviting you to join me in Immortalis and get in the community, because this is the future. As I was saying, it's the first civilization on Earth that joins our cousins throughout the civilization universe, because the civilization universe are those civilizations who have surpassed their nuclear decision threshold by purging irrationality, laziness, dishonesty, and they are, well, what Immortalis is going to become. They are just these joyful, child of the past, happy value creators, creating their values for others. And it's just a beautiful, safe, healthy, wealthy, but not with money, but with feelings of happiness and joy, society out there. And that's civilization of the universe. That's what we're starting on Earth. First time on Earth. We've always been in an anti-civilization. Now we're joining the civilization of the universe.
It's wild to me because, there have been other out there theories who've been kind of wanting to have a similar end result. But a huge difference I see is that they're trying to change and manipulate and kind of do some contortions to get there. But with what you're saying, it's the complete opposite. You're just removing limitations. Right. You're removing blockers and barriers and limitations from individuals and from society itself, removing initiatory force, removing mysticism or mind limitations and things like that, removing dependence on certain things, and you're just allowing people to be free. You're allowing people's minds to be free. You're allowing businesses to be free. You're allowing civilization to be free. And it's nothing complex at all. All it is just removing the limitations and letting people do what they want to do.
That's so great you brought that up. Let's just take a real quick example. The Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights were listing rights. The problem is once you start listing rights, then there are, once you list rights, then there are things that you don't have. And the founding fathers really struggled over the Bill of Rights. There's a history. We can at another time talk about all of this. But what the prime law does, which will be the Constitution of Immortalis, it does exactly what you just said. It just removes the negative. It doesn't add the positive, because the positive can start being manipulated and changed, as we've seen over the decades. The Bill of Rights has very little power now. It's battle worn. But once you remove the negative, which is what the prime law, that's all the founding fathers needed was the prime law. And they were just this close. They were so close to it. But there were a lot of pressures back then. The country was in debt. They had lost able-bodied men during the war. The colonies were starting to fall apart. They had to find this balance between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So, the Bill of Rights, it was introduced. But that's adding the positive. Adding the positive today is tearing apart the country. We have all these rights, DEI rights, ESG rights, all these minority rights, and all these rights. But you need to just remove the negative. And by the way, the prime law is the fundamental natural law of protection. So it protects everyone because it protects the smallest of all the minorities, the minority of one. And once you protect the minority of one, everyone is equally protected. You don't need all these rights all over the place, which can be manipulated and used to gain votes and to control and suppress civilization. Do this for some people to suppress these people. All that goes away by removing the negative. That was the big thing that the founders of our country missed, was removing the negative.
And by the negative, you mean the only thing that gives politicians and people who want to manipulate you power, which is initiatory force.
Right. You have to remove that. And once you remove it, there's no corruption that can happen, which with rights, corruption does happen, right? Because you can manipulate change and use those rights. But once you remove the negative, there's nothing you can do to corrupt or manipulate anything because the negative has been removed.
So really, it all just comes down to you saying all of this is just simply get out of the way to the ruling class, to the politicians, to people who want to manipulate you. It's like, just get them out of the way and let people be free to do what they want and pursue their passions. And humans are naturally good, and we will just naturally get there. But all these things, the politicians, the ruling class are just blocking and slowing things down and distorting things and just keep getting in the way of humankind, for whose humankind will just do the right thing. And once they're out of the way, then humanity can transcend.
And I'll tell you, because wherever I go, I get these, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And everyone watching this will be saying that to you, what you just said. Well, what about this? Well, what about these people? What about, but here's the thing to remember. The prime law is removing initiatory force. That's the only thing that's evil in society. So first of all, the desire for crime will almost go away completely because everyone will be wealthy in Immortalis. So the motivation of money, for crime, that just goes away. But the other thing is the consequences would be so swift because we're so honed in on that. So swift and so unforgiving for initiatory force that it just won't happen. And it doesn't need to happen. Everything's beautiful in that society. So you would not have crime in Immortalis. You would have only a theory of crime, or your grandchildren will say, Daddy, what? Or Granddaddy, what's crime? What is that? And it would be so foreign to their minds. It wouldn't even, you would say, well, sometimes people used to stab people for money, and they would go, what? It would just be so outside of the realm of the beautiful society.
Right.
And this is no utopia. This is Immortalis. This is real. I've laid it all out in my book, The Super Puzzle. It's a trilogy. And now we're actualizing that. This is not some pipe dream. This is not some fantasy. This is not some science fiction. This is an unbroken line of logic that's easily followed. This is the real deal. This is not an illusion.
Wow. And so for somebody to take next steps or wants to get involved and find out more and wants to be a part of this incredible movement, what do they do?
Well, they could go to joinimmortalis.com. That's join and then IMMORTALIS, joinimmortalis.com to learn more, join the community, and see what we're up to.
Well, that's amazing. That's super exciting.
Well, I got a question for you before we go, Wallace. What do you think if you sat down with some of your friends and tried to talk to them about this? What would happen? What do you think how they would react to you?
It depends how I approach it, but I feel like, well, some of them, it depends how I pre-frame it, because just if I talk to somebody, they might be trapped in the current way of thinking.
Yes.
Anytime there's a new idea or a societal a new idea that changes the dynamics of humankind or civilization for the better, it always at first gets mocked, ridiculed, you get called crazy and things like that. It's just because people are trapped in a box of the current way of doing things. So that projection of doing something new is so foreign. So for some of my friends, that would be the case. For some other of my friends who are much more open-minded and kind of deeper, bigger thinkers, they could probably start to really understand it. But if I just start off with the fact saying, kind of with the prime law, it's like, should one person be able to force somebody else to do something they don't want to do? I mean, that's something every single person on planet Earth will agree with, unless they are an evil person or want to manipulate other people.
Okay, so that's where a lot of people do start with the prime law. But once you go beyond the prime law to where we went to today, that's where you lose them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this right now. That's why I'm so excited about Doge, because they've all been, with delusions, they've all been brainwashed. They need to be deprogrammed. Our entire civilization, all civilizations throughout the world have been brainwashed, thinking we must have that ruling class up there controlling civilization.
Right.
So Doge is going to break that spell, going to deprogram the cult victims, which is civilization, by showing them that we don't need them up there. And that's going to open people's eyes. And then I want you to talk to your friends, because then they'll be able to say, let's go all the way. Let's go to Immortalis.
Right.
So join us in Immortalis. That's joinimmortalis.com. I'll see you there.